productivity goes down. Your total, your net productivity goes down because you're shading out the ground layer and taking nutrients and moisture from any ground layer, so you have less photosynthesis going on. Then all of a sudden, boom, a fire comes through or a windstorm comes through and removes a whole bunch of that biomass. Once you remove that biomass, there's not as much living plants, not as many living plants there. A year shows you have a net loss of ecosystem productivity because you cut the trees, or fire knocked them or burned them all up, or windstorm knocked them down. Well, then through the decay, the rapid decay of any organic matter in the system, without plants to take it up, you don't have any net productivity going on here. So this shows that it starts over at ground zero and it builds back up, closes canopy, starts to decrease, kaboom, another fire. So with a episodic situation like that, we have these releases of nutrient and biomass. The biomass goes away, nutrients is leached and lost from the system. Biomass goes away, nutrients are lost. Biomass goes away, nutrients are lost. This is very common throughout the world. These time periods are different depending on the disturbance regime of where you are. Fire may be the dominant issue. Grazing, elephants, for example, might be the dominant issue. Wind might be the dominant disturbance. So this pattern is normal, and if we learn a little bit about it, we can insert ourselves into that and harvest yields and not harm the overall health of the system. I showed this a while ago. Is if we have this all of a sudden reduction in overstory, whether it's a fire or a windstorm or a clear cut, now we're going to have full sun, so we might as well put our crops in here, our annual crops. Let's have a period of years where we're growing lots of annual crops while the perennial crops are recovering. And then once the woody system has recovered, and then we won't do as many annual crops, it's getting too shady, and then we do another removal, and then we grow more annuals. And so this kind of could show a, if we started here with another red arch here, we started with lots of annual crops in the early years. Let's just take this as an example. Let's say that this is what my farm in Wisconsin was for the zillions of years until Europeans showed up. They showed up, they cut down all the forests, plowed up all the ground, and grew their annual crops for a period of time. And then when they abandoned it, I began the replanting process. But in the early years, I was heavily reliant on the red, which is lots of annuals. As time has gone on, my reliance on annuals goes down. My reliance on perennials and woody plants starts to go up until at some point in time I can either choose to reset the system or let it wait a bit and have a closed canopy. It's totally my choice. Here's another example of what if we used perennials, and the classic perennial in the system would be grass. After disturbance, there's lots of grass. As the canopy closes, the grass doesn't grow as fast. You have a release, you remove the overstory, your grass grows better, and then as your trees recover, the grass starts to decline in yields, and then once again you do this pulsing release of the grass and then shading out of the grass. Release of the grass, shading out of the grass. All done with a chainsaw, two-man saw, axe, fire, or wind if you want to do it, or a bulldozer, tractor. You can do it all with animals. So this takes us to our three different case study plots. There's one in southeastern Wisconsin, which is Jess. She's on the workshop here on the webinar tonight. Jess Bernstein, and then one is in the Netherlands, where I'm working with some folks that weren't able to be here tonight because it's like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning for them, and it drives them nuts to stay up for these webinars. And then one is an example from New Forest Farm. And the reason why I'm using these three different examples is that they're all at different stages, but we're dealing with same plant community, same current plant community, and the same target plant community later on. And what we have here, this is at Jess's place in southeast Wisconsin. What we have is a lot of Tartarian honeysuckle, A lot of garlic mustard in the foreground. There's a lot of what are considered invasive species, and they really are. These will choke out a lot of your forest-grown ephemeral plants, forest plants of Wisconsin, many places around the world actually. There's some pines in here. This is just white pine, but they're failing to thrive because they're being overtopped by the black locust, and the black locust, very fast growing. It's nitrogen fixing, very rot resistant wood. So many permies think that this is the greatest wood in the world. It's fantastic. Everybody needs black locusts, but over and over and over, this is what black locust does. It forms these really dense, pure stands. Since it grows faster than everything else, it chokes out most of more desirable plant community, forest community, and it really rapidly clears out all the grass component in the understory. And as in the case here, I don't know why, but it's like as soon as black locusts close the canopy, for some reason garlic mustard shows up. Even if you don't have garlic mustard around, if you plant black locusts and they close canopy, you're going to have garlic mustard. And that's considered it's a non-native, it's considered invasive, and it's a really aggressive, assertive plant. Well, back to the black locust. What an incredible, fabulous, plant and all that kind of stuff. Just yesterday, that's Tuesday, just yesterday, I did this. Yes, another $765 spent on another tractor tire lost to black locust. And this tire actually has a story. I got it off my tractor because it finally had too many. It was a sidewall puncture with the thorns. Got it off my tractor, rolled it up on the trailer, drove it to town, dropped it off. I dropped it off before I did my workshop and install road trip there. And then when I called the shop yesterday, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe what happened." Well, this tire, as it was fixed, they took the old tire off. They put a new one on, new tube, and then they put the fluid in it, so it's got lots of weight. As the guy was taking it off the machine, it tipped over and it fell on top of him, bent him over backwards. He broke his back and he broke his left leg. And when I was getting my tire, he was sitting. This is the office over in here. He was sitting in there. He had a wheelchair that he was sitting in a regular chair, but the wheelchair was over on the right. And he had a walker he could stand up and then kind of hobble over to the wheelchair and get around with. And so he doesn't really like this tire. Well, I kind of like the tire, but I don't like what the black locusts did to my tire. And if you really think about it, what happened is because I had black locusts on my property and I was dealing with black locusts on my property and they punctured holes in my tires. Because I have black locusts, a guy broke his back and his leg and has lost a week plus worth of work, and who knows what his insurance thing is. So my thrill with black locust is long since over. It's a wonderful, useful plant. I don't know of anybody who's suffering from a black locust deficiency at this point in time, but here it is. We got to deal with it. So here's back to Jess's project in southeast Wisconsin. Look at all of the garlic mustard in here, the tangle of trees. Any trees that are in here have tried to kind of get to the light, and they've lost the struggle. We're now strongly in the stem exclusion phase. We've got trees that are dying. There is hardly anything useful here in this particular place for a farm. And I forget how many acres. Can you punch how many acres that you have totally in there, Jess? Just let me know. Yeah, of course, and somebody made a comment too that all those thorns are horrible for cow feed as well. They are as well. So I think it's about whoa, don't go that fast. So I think it's about 70 or 80 acres, maybe 120 acres on this particular property. Just more views, and you see this tree is leaned over and it's tried to resprout and go up to find the light, and nothing is thriving except for the black locust. And the understory, here's a poor black walnut that's trying to survive. It's really branched out wide and it's skinny as heck. Beautiful garlic mustard. If you want to make garlic mustard pesto, go for it. And I know a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, you can use garlic mustard for this and that and this and that and the other thing." Well, why aren't you, and why isn't everybody? So what we have is we have a system here that we can actually go into this we can replace this existing overstory of black locust. We can replace it with a more native forest community type, and we can do it, instead of doing it the way that foresters or restoration ecologists might do it, go in there, eradicate the locusts, plant this new system, and manage it with herbicide in order for it to take over. We can actually interact with this, harvest yields from it from day one, and convert it over a period of years to a far more useful system that actually produces food for us and forage for our animals. And there's another picture. I'm gonna look at this question a little bit more closely that Jorge or George asked. Explain the carbon productivity in the same year, spring, summer, autumn, winter in desert areas. Boy, you're talking for about a whole series of webinar sessions. I don't know the specifics of what you're trying to ask with this question, but with any woody system, let's take this particular one right here. If this was in Arizona, it would obviously look different in New Mexico. In the spring of the year, the plants are growing, they're elongating quite a bit, so there's going to be a lot more carbon goes to branches and root mass as that tree is growing. Once the tree has elongated, either genetically predetermined period of time or weather predetermined, based on the moisture, etc., then it'll go through a phase where it sets buds for next year, it gets ready for next year, then it starts to fatten up and store energy in its roots to survive the winter to start again next year. In the autumn of the year, there'll be a lot more sloughing that will deposit material on the surface. So that's pretty standard no matter where you go. How those different carbon sources in the middle of the summer and late fall, you're going to have a lot more fine root sloughing. In the early spring, there will be, the break of dormancy. There will be a lot more nutrient release from decomposition. So it changes throughout the year. And part of why I brought up the whole thing on timing of chop and drop, we can decide when to have a flush of carbon going into our system that will be available for decomposition. We can decide when to go in here and trim these branches based on our growth objectives for the trees in question. Now, how we're going to do this, we're going to jump quickly. So here is this black locust, invasive species understory in southeast Wisconsin. It's not much different at all, really, from what's going on over in the Netherlands. This is at a place called Woestebos, W-O-E-S-T-E-B-O-S, which means the fierce forest. And it's in the northern part of Netherlands, obviously on flatter ground that's been canal drained and pumped. They're using pigs to do the conversion. So what they're doing is, if everybody knows how knows how pigs operate in a system, you see that they will root everything up. If they run out of food to eat, they'll start plowing the ground, and they can make a real mess of things. Well, since we know that about pigs, we can use that as a tool. So instead of going in and burning off, having a surface fire to burn off all the organic matter, or instead of going in with, we've seen one of those forestry mulchers that we've used, instead of using a forestry mulcher, which is an expense that will chip everything up and put it on the ground, we can actually use pigs to accomplish the same thing. We can use the pigs to eradicate the surface vegetation, to disturb the soil, to expose bare mineral soil, so the site will be prepared for the next succession of plants. And so here is the pigs going through, rooting it all up. Notice the green in the background. So notice the green outside of the pig's paddock. So what the pigs, of course, do is they'll graze first and they'll plow a little bit. Well, then once they've grazed everything away, then they'll start to plow in earnest. Well, they plow in earnest the stuff that's easy to plow. They graze what's tasty to graze, and they overgraze the system. If you were just grazing your pigs in the woods and doing this, you're destroying a forest resource. However, if we know that we're destroying the forest resource and we're destroying it on purpose and selectively, we are going to go in, and most of the grasses that were in the system that you see in the background here, the bright greens, these are all annual rye. So they're an annual grass. It's not even native to the area in the Netherlands. And then what we see, these little tufts, these are the tufts of a wetlands sedge, and nobody likes to eat those. The pigs don't like to eat it. The cattle don't like to eat it. So we're gonna keep the pigs there on purpose to eradicate the annual rye and to eradicate the tufts of the sedge. So if you go look at Jess's system here, all the garlic mustard, there's multiflora rose out there, prickly ash. Prickly ash is native. There's honeysuckle. There's all these different non-natives and or invasives that we can eradicate this understory layer and prepare the mineral soil for the next succession, which we'll put in place. And so this is after a period of time. I didn't get to ask the crew on the ground how long this was, but this was approximately 2 or 3 months with the pigs on it, and it was decided in this area here, in order to get rid of the sedge, to go ahead and leave them on longer and to really get abusive to get rid of that sedge. Because if we just leave the sedge there and then begin phase 2 and phase 3, the sedge is going to get released, and we don't want that. We want the sedge to be eradicated. We want the bare mineral soil exposed so we can get our desired species established. So you can see some of the sedge in the background. We got all this organic matter now lying on the soil. They're mixing it in. Their dung and their urine is accelerating, rapidly accelerating this decomposition process. So if you look back at the graph where it showed the fire, and then there was a fire, that means that right now in here there's being a large removal of biomass, and there's a release, a flush of nutrients available in the soil. Still got a little bit of the sedge in here, but they're doing a pretty good job mucking it up. And then what was decided a couple of weeks ago is, in order to get the sedge, because they weren't really going after it. It's like every morning when you go out there, toss a scoop of grain on top of these sedges, and they're not necessarily eating the sedge, but they're trying to root the grain out, and they start rooting the sedge up, and you see how this has been completely uprooted. It's starting to do a pretty good job. And just look at all the manure, heavily manured. This is abusive grazing with pigs, and now they really mucked it up. But this is only phase 1. This is being done on purpose in order to eradicate the invasive, undesirable species. And you can see this little temporary fence here. We're going to start to exclude the animals from this area as we start the next phase, phase 2. That's a serious eradication of invasive species. I don't see hardly any invasive species. I don't see any undesirable sedge, etc. That's very similar to what I've got going on in New Forest Farm in Wisconsin. This is the same thing that has happened. Is I've got this overstory of black locust. This is younger than the previous 2 photographs, and what it has is it already has underneath it the desired plant community is in place. Now the desired plant community in both of these circumstances is based around the oak plant community. So that would be Fagaceae, oak, chestnut, or beech, mostly oak and chestnut. Then an understory of malus, apples, pyrus, pears, cherries, prunuses, a understory of hazelnut or wild plum, shade tolerance of currants and gooseberries, and at least in the case of the one in the Netherlands, they're going to go heavy on planting a lot of different native grassland, semi-grassland wildflowers. The plant community, that oak family plant community in the Netherlands, in all of Western Europe, it's pretty much what's called wood pasture, whereas in the U.S. it would be oak savanna. And so that's what I did starting this winter. Is I went in, and this is what Jess's group is going to start doing now. what the Worcester Bus guys are doing now is start to go in and strategically remove the overstory to allow sun to reach the understory. So now in the case where it's been turned to muck like this, as soon as you take that out, stuff is going to grow. So what do you want to grow there? We might as well plant some perennial pasture plants that are native, natural to the area. So now you'll have a perennial pasture that gets established after we move the pigs out. So this is how dense mine looked like with this overstory. We've got oaks, and you can see they're kind of in a row. I planted these oaks in a row. There's oak, chestnut, walnut, hybrid poplar, and they've been overgrown by black locust. I kind of liked what the black locust did at first. If you look at how straight and tall these oak stems have grown, and the same with the walnut, in order to get any light, they had to grow straight up. And so at least I got good tree form, but as you can see already, I mean, here's the grass out in the path, and now the grass component is all but disappeared. It's gone too far. Now, I've grazed in here every year for 20-ish years, but now there's less and less for the animals to eat, and some of my walnuts especially are starting to lose the battle for nutrients and moisture, so it's time to get rid of that overstory and have my desired plant community, the one that provides, you know, feed for animals in the form of grass and nuts, and high-quality timber in the form of oak and walnut, mushroom logs in the form of hybrid poplar and oak. And all these hybrid poplars in this system, you can see a little bit of the remaining stump here. They were all logged about 9 years ago, 10 years ago, and they were milled into boards that made my cider mill building. So you can see the stump of these hybrid poplars and all the stump sprouts that came up off of it. Here's the stump, stump sprouts, stump, and stump sprouts. So my first step here is actually what will happen at phase 1, 2, and 3 in Jess's site and at the site in the Netherlands is to start removing the overstory, start to open it up, get some sunshine in there, and here's easy to see how I've got my nice row of oaks all lined up here. And of course, one of the yields right off the bat, in my system, I've been grazing animals there for 20 years. I got lumber, almost 10 years ago, and then I got mushroom logs 10 years ago. Now I've got this chipwood that's going to be on the ground that we're going to be inoculating with stropharia and firewood. The day that this picture was taken, it was a half a quart of wood, 1 tank of chainsaw gas, half a quart of wood, $150, cash equivalent. And actually, what the folks in the Netherlands tell me, I've never tried it myself, they say that black locust actually grows shiitakes fairly well. I've never done it. I'm going to try that this spring. I want to show this picture because this is actually really instrumental. And why, might you ask? That right there is a rodent poop. And so the rodent poop, if you are familiar with chipmunks and mice and squirrels, what they'll do is they'll go around and they'll grab fruiting bodies of mushrooms, and they'll hang them in the trees to dry them. So they've got dehydrated mushrooms. Plus, they eat a lot themselves. And a lot of research has shown how critically important it is to have mushroom-inoculated rodent poop in a area, especially a clear-cut area, because if you open the system up too much too fast, like it took to look at that the place where we overgrazed it with the pigs in the Netherlands there, you've really messed with the whole mycelial web because you're having a massive die-off of all these roots. You need some new restarts. So your rodent poops with mushroom spores right in there, this is what's part of making this a truly regenerative system. Yes, we'll go out and we'll chip on purpose, chop branches on purpose, and inoculate with mushroom spawn, but the life itself within this system keeps perpetuating it. And that right there is, believe it or not, rodent poop is really key to continuing the health and productivity of our systems. So this was taken, I believe, yesterday. And so after, notice I didn't even finish picking up all the wood pile. I did manage to go by twice with the mower before this was actually taken a couple weeks ago then, because I went through with the mower, and it was while I was mowing this area. I wanted to chip all this too, but I only got 2 passes with the mower when I got another thorn in the sidewall. And so that's when I had to stop using the tractor, was after this picture was taken. And look how already how the grass has responded. And this is obviously springtime of the year here. You know, dormancy, buds aren't quite open all the way yet, but they're starting to. And so we can see now that the additional light that will be in here, this grass will really respond well, and all these chips will decompose. And this was the one taken yesterday. The other one was 2 weeks ago. And notice how all the green that's going on in here, once I go through, pick up the rest of the logs, chip all this up, the grass ought to really, really flourish, and all the wood will decompose, and that's nutrients, because what's left behind, I've got left behind oaks and walnuts. That's what the trees left behind are. And you'll notice that the canopy isn't completely opened. I probably got it down to 50% canopy. We'll see when it closes up. I'm going to take pictures of this throughout the year. We're going to take pictures of Jess's place throughout the season as it progresses as well, just to see how things look. So between Jess's project, the Netherlands project, and this project, it's the same plant community we're dealing with, same principles, all different stages in time. And so I'm going to piece it all together for you guys to follow pretty soon here. Here's just another look. You see how the grass is moving in. I also did broadcast some seed out there, some pasture seed, and I will be taking down most of these hybrid poplars. I wasn't in a hurry to take them down because I took out so much black locust in here. There's going to be plenty of sun for my walnuts and oaks. I'll take these down at my convenience and inoculate them with oyster mushroom. All right, so here's Jess's property in southeastern Wisconsin. It's very sandy. There's like this rocky outcropping over here, and there's a sand deposit. So much sand that this was a mine. It's a sand quarry, sand pit, and that they would have loaded onto the train once upon a time, because this is an abandoned train track that's now a recreational trail. We'll zoom in a little bit closer here. Now, the kind of the case study area that we're looking at is this right in here. And a number of weeks ago when we did a workshop there, this is what was decided to be a project area, because it was the same time of year season-wise as what was going on in the Netherlands and going on at my place, and it's the most convenient to work with, because you know, here's their house, barn, and buildings. It's fairly flat, and this is where it starts to get really steep. You can kind of see the shadow line here. That's the base of the hill where it starts to get steep. This is somewhat flat. We can get a somewhat regular width. A lot more regular with fence than I can with scribbles on PowerPoint. So phase one is we're going to divide this into 3 different units. And in this particular case, they're slightly over an acre apiece in the Wisconsin site. Over in the Netherlands, they're dealing with larger acreages and more pigs. So this will be fewer pigs and smaller numbers, but the principles are what I'm trying to get at here, is how to approach this particular project. How do we convert black locust thicket with invasive species underneath? How do we convert that into a more desired natural forest type and cash flow along the way? So year one, we're going to go into here in this one little plot right here, and this is ongoing right now, and boom, we're going to mess it up. We're going to put in the pigs. We're going to put in way too many pigs, and we're going to, probably the majority of their nutrition is going to come from feed that we're delivering to them. So this is just raising pigs in an area, and we're not going to put rings in their noses. In the Netherlands, they have the issue that it's legally not allowed to put rings in their noses, so they're not putting rings in the noses. Well, at Jess's place, we're not going to put rings in the noses because we want those pigs to mess it up. These are Tamworths, and Tamworths are notorious. They got this big, long snout. They're outstanding grass eaters. So obviously there wasn't any grass left to eat, so they start plowing the ground. During year one, whoever the person is that's in charge of feeding the animals will come out to plot number 1, feed the animals, make sure they got water, so they'll all be in this area right here, and then they'll take out a chainsaw. Before they do that, they'll mark some rows of trees to maintain. Now I put them this way on the slope simply because it kind of mimics the shape of the hill. We can actually mark the trees in such a way that any overland overflow of water will start to pitch along these lines and go to the ridge area from valleyed areas. So we can use this as a mirror of our water management system. And then if you go out, you feed the pigs, you water the pigs, you've got these rows marked. Now you take out the chainsaw and you begin removing the lousiest looking material first. You start removing trees, just like I did earlier, to release the understory and to release the desired plant community. So that's phase one. So you'd have a lot of wood coming out. It probably looks similar to this, and you'd also have your pigs out there at the same time. So year one revenues, we're going to have pigs and pork, firewood, fence posts, building materials, and educational workshops. They've already had educational workshops. That was when I was there 2 weeks ago plus. The building material, fence posts, and firewood, this is up to them. They can extract this, harvest this for the rest of the summer. And if they start by harvesting the poorest quality material first, and the locusts that are actually shading out oaks or walnuts or other more desirable tree species, remove those first. And then, of course, the pigs and the pork will be our revenue. Now, year two will now move. So this in year one, this has had the overstory, much of the overstory of locust removed. It's had the pigs messed it all up, so it's totally mucked up underneath. Now we'll go to unit 2, year 2, unit B. We'll do the same thing. Bring in the pigs and muck up unit 2 and get it to look like this. Meanwhile, the first one, unit A, we're going to go back to it and we're going to scatter our seed. Now that we've removed the overstory of locust, there's a lot more sunlight coming in. This was on New Forest Farm just taken a few days ago. And start broadcasting that seed. There'll be more light. Now we're going to get some forage growing in here. We're not going to put animals on it on year 2. We want this forage to get fully established and really settled in. We may need to do a little bit of finish mowing to prevent resprouts and that sort of thing. So when thinning the trees, it's a good idea to make the widths between the trees wide enough so you can get through with a flail chopper or forestry mulcher to prevent the resprouts. And this is what it looked like just a couple days ago. And look who showed up, all by himself. I didn't do that. Sometimes when I chip like this, I'll get a big flush of morels in the spring, but it's not predictable. I wish I could, predict it and count on it, but I have no idea what really makes them grow. And notice the grass starting to flush in here. So this is unit A, the year 2, the second year. Also in the second year, we're going to go in and we're going to plant our desired replacement forest community. We'll plant oaks, we'll plant chestnuts, apples, cherries, pears, whatever the desired species are. This is the time to do it, is year 2 on unit A. So year 1 was muck it up with the pigs. Year 2 is replant your forage mix and any new plant community type while the pigs move to unit 2. Now, out of year 2, we're going to get different revenue streams. We're going to get our pigs and our pork and our wood products. Well, we're also going to get mushrooms because of the surface chips like this, and any wood that we removed year 1 is definitely starting to flush by year 2. So we'll have things like lion's manes, shiitakes, chicken of the woods, oysters, enokis, reishis, maitakes, whatever our choice is, stropharias, of course, in all the surface chips. So we've gone 2 years already going toward a desired plant community type, and we're producing revenues while we do it. Year 3, unit C, muck it up with the pigs. Unit B, reestablish our pasture, get our new trees going in place. So back at unit A is now year 3. Now we can put in some cows, 1 or 2. This is actually a place on New Forest Farm. This is mostly an overstory of white ash and black walnut with the cattle in there. It's not necessarily black locust. This was black locust over chestnut. One of the earlier pictures I showed with the canopy structure. This was after we went through and removed the non-desirables, including the locust overstory, and then we graze the cattle in there. I guess get some poultry going. These are guineas here, but we could do, we could do turkeys, we can do chickens, we can do guineas, and get the poultry in there, eating bugs and eating seeds. So your 3 revenues will have pigs and pork, wood, mushrooms, steers for beef, poultry, and eggs, and then workshops. Increasing revenues coming from that property while we're eradicating invasive species and establishing a desired preferred forest cover type. Now, year 4 is when it starts to get really interesting. Well, year 3, we're going to have issues with the cattle because there's not enough acreage. 1 acre here is not enough for any more than 1 steer, and we wouldn't want to put 1 steer in there and just keep there all summer because we don't want to degrade the pasture. We'll have that pasture 1 for a period of time, and we'll go in and we'll graze it for a period of time, and then we'll pull the cattle after they've grazed it down, and then we'll watch and we'll wait and we'll learn what the recovery period is. Like recovery period, I mean, if we got grasses growing, perennial grasses, they start growing in the spring, they elongate, and then their seed head starts to shoot up and it's enclosed in a leaf. If we graze it at that point there, doesn't matter how tall or short it is necessarily, when you graze it at that stage, it's going to flush a lot of carbon into the soil, sugars into the soil life's going to proliferate, and then the grass rebounds, and then when the grass comes back to the same phase of having that seed head in it, that's the recovery period. From first boot, the first little boot around the seed head, to first boot is the recovery period. We want to learn that with the cattle in year 3, because on year 4, we're not going to come in and we're going to rotate the pigs through there, and we're going to divide that paddock up into the number of days in the recovery period. If it's a 30-day recovery period, we're going to have 30 different sub-paddocks. If it's a 60-day recovery period, we'll have 60 different paddocks in there. What will happen is when we graze pigs in here, we'll have the same number of pigs as we did out here, but they're going to be in here and for 1 day, and we're going to have a flash mob of a ton of pigs, and the idea is to graze it aggressively and abusively, but not rip up the pasture. So we're going to divide it into subunits based on the recovery period of the grasses. And then this is kind of what we want to see down the line. This is actually at a project in New York State. I don't know if Skylar is on the webinar tonight, but they do pastured pigs with no rings in their noses. And the idea is to get a huge mob of pigs in there really fast, and they're only on that unit for a day or so, and then they move to the next unit. And these are... What?
I hate to interrupt you, but I apologize. We do have a hard stop because we have another webinar right after yours. We'll have to prep for that. So we probably have 5 minutes more to wrap it up, and then we can continue the presentation next week, and you can start from.
And then these are the last few, Mark. This is kind of showing the sum total right here.
Sure. Okay.
So then what we've got is we're gonna high intensity flash graze them to maximize number of pigs, minimize pasture damage. Year 5 and year 6. So we've taken 6 years to get there. Now what we have is we have a thin overstory of locust remaining. We have a rich, lush pasture underneath. We have a replacement overstory of whatever our desired plant community is. And we did this. We did invasive species removal, and we harvested yields all along the way while we did it. And it's okay that it took us 6 years to do it, because we have to learn what's our recovery period, how many subunits, how do we handle pigs with pasture, how much is too much damage, how much is not enough damage. All these things we get to learn. It's going to take 6 years to do it. We've eradicated invasive species, established a productive native forest community type that will produce food, fuels, medicines, fiber, animal feed, while firewood and feeding ourselves. Does that differ from what a forester would do, or an ecological restoration company that would come in, eradicate the invasive species using herbicides, and then establish a new one, buying all new plant material coming in, and then controlling it and managing it all with fertilizers, fungicides, pesticides, and herbicides? The foresters and the ecological restoration companies, as a rule, it's input-based, it's expense, it's all expense, whereas a restoration agriculture style, we do have inputs. Yep, we are going to be buying fence and livestock, etc., mushroom spawn. We're going to be doing labor like chainsaw work, but it minimizes our inputs. We are going to be buying some nursery stock, minimizes our input, and attempts to optimize our yields. And at the end of the day, We get to eat delicious, fantastic stuff for breakfast, and that's the kind of stuff that I get to eat these days. And so I guess I don't have a lot of time for a lot of questions. And one of the questions, Autumn Olive, a great nitrogen fixer, edible berry with lycopene and tomato, more lycopene than tomatoes, cattle eat it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it's another one of those species that we don't really need it. When we're interacting with the decomposition rate and decomposition cycle, all the fungi going on in our soil, we don't need nitrogen-fixing woody plants in our system, especially if you're in an area where autumn olive takes over and is aggressive. If you have a ready market and you can sell all the autumn olive that you possibly can, yeah, go for it. Have it in your system. I don't mind having a little bit of it. It's pretty easy to kill. You just run into it with a front-end loader and it pulls out real easy. You mow it a couple times and it gives up. So I let it grow where it's not causing problems for me. But I really don't encourage people to plant autumn olive if you don't have it. And I never thought that sea buckthorn, the Hippophae rhamnoides, which looks very similar to autumn olive, I never thought that that was really invasive until I went to southeastern Quebec, southeastern Ontario. Southeastern Ontario is just amazingly insane. It's as crazy aggressive as autumn olive is in the upper Midwest and the humid East. So how do I manage microbial communities in forest pasture systems? This is how we manage microbial communities in forest pasture systems, is we are going to imitate natural plant community succession. We will change from agricultural fields or clear cuts toward a more three-dimensional, semi-open, grassy woodland or wooded grassland. These plant community, the microbial communities change over time when you do a management change and you do a biology change. If you really feel the urge to go ahead and add biologicals to the system, go for it. You know, there's nothing stopping you. But one of the things that I'm trying to show with all of these ecology webinars is the fact that we don't need to do input-based agriculture. We don't have to input all these bugaboos because that's another expense. You got to buy the tanks, you got to buy the water, you got to bubblers, and you know sometimes you got the spiral horn, this and that and the other thing. You got to apply it somehow, put it here, take time out of your day. That's work. Screw it. If we just follow nature's rules and figure out how to insert ourselves into it, that plant community and the subsurface community will change through time and turn into exactly what we want it to. It goes right in the direction that we want to do it. As a black locust come back by suckering, oh my goodness. A black locust comes back ferociously. That's one of the reasons why I recommend having enough width in your system so you can get in there with a finish mower. Cattle like to graze it down. The pigs do remove a lot of the suckers as well, but they won't stop it. So there will be a need for preventing resprouts, whether it's whether it's with additional abusive grazing, heavy-duty weed eater with a table saw blade on it, carbide tip tape with a table saw blade to knock out resprouts, or my preferred monster is the flail chopper going through it. What kind of cows do I have? We don't have any cows right now, but the kind of cows that I usually get is what we call cheap. Go to the sale barn and get the cheap ones, as cheap as you can, and then you put them out there and you let them eat grass, which grows for free. And then you can even take them back to the sale barn and sell them for cheap. And if you gain 3 pounds a day over a half a year, you just gained 300 pounds of free beef, and you get that additional gain. Super easy, no hassles. We don't have to look for $15 a pound super marketing, this and that and the other thing. You call up John, hey John, I want 10 cows. Then he brings 10 cows. In October, hey John, take them away. He takes them away. I keep one, put it in the freezer. So cheap cows. And thank you everybody for coming by tonight. And thank you, Mark, this time for at least interrupting me so I could call it quits in a hurry. Instead of being cut off completely. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. We're going to dive deeper now into practical applications and ecological restoration through restoration agriculture. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Good night.
All right. So, everybody who's been here, thank you so much. You can catch Mark Shepard's replay again next week. So, uh, Robert asked for the original video, so you can find this on our Eat Community website. If you are an elite member, and I believe you are, Robert, you can go there and watch the complete video. If you missed, you said you missed the uh, beginning of this presentation. So everybody